Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the DCP Wednesday live stream here with myself, James, aka Foxy Lockhart, and of course joined here as ever by the unstoppable, the irrepressible, the unstainable. It's Dungeon Master.
The unsustainable.
I'm not saying I kind of ran out of steam at the end of there, but there we go. I believe you are unstainable. Would you
What
support
a
that
title.
statement?
I have never felt more like Daenerys Targaryen. Um, since
Splendid.
delivered a disappointing episode at some point.
Well,
Um,
yes, exactly. Yeah. Let's not talk about that. Let's not talk about disappointment because it's raining and it's pretty cold here in the UK. Wherever you're watching us from, hello, welcome. Hopefully, somebody is watching us. If you'd like, you can jump onto the chat, which is running currently. If it's not appearing, I'm going to open the Discord just in case we're having any technical issues because, you know, these things do sometimes happen. And what are we going to be talking about this afternoon, Dan?
I love the rain, man. I love that it's. I've been dying when it's been so hot recently.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's. I got a reminder. It should be Boomtown this week.
Oh,
It should be.
no. Of course it should. My
So
goodness.
that was the but that imagine how perfect that would have been weather-wise. Like we had literally a week of glorious sunshine at the exact moment we would have arrived on site. The apocalyptic storms would have rolled in. Like the
Yeah.
clouds were there, like we're here to ruin Dan and James's summer.
Yeah.
And we're like, in your face,
In
our
your.
summer's already ruined.
Yeah, exactly. Not.
Stu, we were talking about what's coming up. So we were talking about episode
Yes.
100. We were saying we dropped a bomb in the first episode of episode 100,
Yes.
and then we are going to just keep. They're going to keep coming in all of the episode 100 bits. There's going to be big things, big reveals, and just exciting battles and more bickering from the new team that is taking part in that. But then afterwards, I'm saying after we get past episode 100,
Mm-hmm.
and we get into episode 101, and it gets really exciting for me because we're going to Garand, which we have never been to in other than the Sandstone Secret. I think that's the only time we've played a game in Garand, including like off-air games. I don't think, because the thing about first edition, one of the big things they wanted to change for second edition, the Paizo wanted to change, is that first edition is very Avestan focused. So the inner sea has two continents. The northern continent is Avestan, which tends to be a much more sort of Western themed, not like Wild West, but like it's Western mythology. It's that kind of,
Mm-hmm.
that's where all your kind of knights and witches and everything you expect to find in a fantasy world. That's where all that goes.
So I thought you meant cowboys and things like
I
that.
know.
Just I was
Ironic,
like gunslingers and saloons and
well,
Western culture.
ironically, they're in the south. They're in Garand because the Manor Wastes are down there, and that's where guns come from.
Oh.
But yeah, the south is called Garand, and that is where you have things that are sort of very quite African and Arabian, and are based on that kind of mythology and that kind of history. And we've never really been there because a lot of very few Pathfinder adventures have explored that. Pathfinder Society goes there now and then, but we never really played that. And so the kind of campaigns we played have never really gone any further south than Absalom, and generally less than that. We've tended to stick up in the north in like the River Kingdoms and stuff.
Yeah.
So it is really exciting to be going to a completely new place.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that we might be going to places like Nex and Katapesh and then onto the Mwangi Expanse, which are just incredibly rich sources of stories and places that we've just not been to at all. And so I've had all my first edition lore books out, and I've been reading through all this stuff and coming up with ideas, and I've been on the phone with Ross coming up with ideas, and just so because of course Beelzebub comes from around there, so it's just now it's like, okay, let's hammer in some backstory because we might be going near your home. What are we doing with that?
So the world hasn't changed in 2E. Like the Path One, the PF1 books are still bang on in terms of their lore.
Relatively.
Right.
So what second edition does is it doesn't do what I think it was fourth edition. One of the D&D ones, which I can never remember. I think it was D&D fourth edition. Although they tend to do it with every edition, where they move things on hundreds of years and they shatter the world, and they just basically are just like, oh, did you play in the last edition? Well, everything you did is gone. Like,
Yeah.
these
Yeah.
countries don't exist anymore. These people now wear hats. This is all different. Everything changes for it. Whereas Pathfinder kept everything in real time. So the timeline of Pathfinder since first edition to second edition has moved on by just over 10 years, which is the time that since first edition came out. So it is now 4720 or something like that, rather than 4714.
Who knows the dates?
I don't think
think
exactly.
even the most hardcore sort of gamers sort of actually quote dates. It's like it's summer.
Some people get my GM Paul, my GM in Kingmaker can tell you what day it is. Like if you ask him, he'll tell you which day of the week it is, and he'll tell you what the weather is like because he's got a generator for it, so you can do stuff like that. We are very much not that kind of show.
Yes.
Yes. We literally don't know what year it is.
We don't even do encumbrance, so you know.
But what they do is what they did when they updated it is that they just codified the results of every adventure path. So they picked an ending for every adventure path of the ones that had multiple possibilities. And then those happened in lore. And so when you read the Lost Omens World Guide, which is really like an addition book to the Inner Sea World Guide, which is the first edition lore book. So Lost Omens one is much smaller, and a lot of it includes updates. But you see loads of references to heroes. And it's just like, heroes destroyed, that brought down the monarchy here and installed a new king.
Right.
Like, oh, okay, that was that adventure then, was it? That was
right. Okay.
And it basically lets you, if you played that adventure, you're like, oh, that was us. So your heroes can be in that version of it. And it's changed a few big things. So like the World Wound is closed now. There's been a change of leadership in Belkzen, which we're sort of playing out. The Whispering Tyrant is back, which is which has been playing out in our show. There's New Thassalon as well, which sounds tremendous, and I want to learn more about this. I want to try and so the Thessalonians are the Rune Lords. They're an ancient empire of decadent wizards who used to live in Varissia, and they were brought down by their own hubris, and they're the antagonists of several adventure paths in first edition, Rise of the Rune Lords through to Return of the Rune Lords, which was one of the last ones they brought out. And at the end of Return of the Rune Lords return.
Well, one would hope they do.
You'd hope, that's, it's selling itself short if they don't.
I always kind of imagine the Return of the Rune Lords as like the sort of the Egyptian faction in Warhammer, that kind of like great big sort of semi-decayed, dog gods and mummies and things like that.
They are crazy, and they're kind of the only time we've ever touched on them.
Hi, Matt. Sorry.
We got some chat.
We just got a little bit of chat. Matt was Mad Turnips was like, now I find you. I was like, sorry. OBS decided to, as I clicked stream, flicked over to my other profile. So we were streaming on my channel, which was hugely egotistical of me, I know. But we're back. We're back in the right place. And we were just discussing, whether or not Pathfinder lore has changed, actually. And we were talking about Rise of the Rune Lords, which is one of the most popular, I believe, isn't it?
Rise of Runners is the very first.
Was it the very first?
So that is the first. It started as a 3.5 one. It then got turned into a Pathfinder one when Pathfinder became a game. So it predates Pathfinder as a game.
Oh wow!
And it's a really good, solid starter adventure. It's the one that everyone starts with,
right?
Or we didn't, and then there are loads of them: Second Darkness, Shattered Star, and they all form. There's about 4 or 5. I can never get this right, but there's like between 4 and 6 adventure paths, which are the Rune Lords saga. So you could play all of them. And it ends with Return of the Rune Lords, where they come back. The Rune Lords, you've met you've seen evidence of the Rune Lords in the Gods Mythossery, because that Kermarga used to be one of the seat of one of the Rune Lords. And that was a Thessalonian temple, burial ground that you were going through. So there were like statues of some of them. And everything in there was kind of based on it. So you had the Spears Morgan was a servant of the Rune Lord of Wrath and things like that.
Right, okay. Because you had the faces on the cliffs as well that no one knows who they are, but they're probably Rune Lords.
They possibly are, although they might not be. But they come back basically and discover that the world has completely changed. And so a few of them are just sort of are like, well, we're not going to wage war against this entire world because we'll die. So I guess we're just here now. And so and what's happened is some of their cities have come back, and a load of people from their civilization have come back, but they're like out of time. So they've sort of reappeared, but the world has changed while they've been gone. So it's like a sort of, even though because it's fantasy, the time frames are much bigger, but it's like sort of a bunch of Elizabethans have just appeared in 21st century London, and they're just like, oh, what is this thing over here?
Yes.
And I think that sounds just so much fun to play. I'm just like, there's not enough lore about them to really get my teeth into it and work out like how they fit into it. But I was just like, that strikes me as a character that'd be great.
Yeah, because you could make them quite quaint. So I was the scourge of the living, and now I'm just sort of what's this thing going on here?
How does this? What is jam?
Yes, what is this? Now, just before we continue, we have a request for a leggings check, please.
Leggings check.
What have we got?
Leggings today. Leggings.
Whoa!
Green sparkly leggings.
Green sparkly leggings. He is the Riddler on his way to a party. That is Dan Thompson today. Splendid.
I went back to yoga so I can actually get my leg up there.
I think I would.
So that's a long-winded way of saying not very much has changed, but also a lot has changed. Right. Most of, if it was an intervention path, it's become part of lore, and we're not fully committed, I would say, to embracing second edition lore, because obviously we started in first edition, but we're kind of gradually I'm trying to pin all those threads together as we go, where they're relevant to our story. So we've brought the Whispering Tyrant back. We've made goblins lovable, and
well, that's a modern thing, isn't it? We got goblins are now playable, and they're now actually they're misunderstood. Which I think is great. Also, you get a bit tired. It's one thing. I've been playing the Fighting Fantasy games on Tuesdays, and generally they're very imaginative with the baddies they throw at you. But every now and then, it's all orcs. It's all orcs and goblins, and you're like, the days where they were literally fantasy's sort of boogeyman, and you couldn't even play an orc. Why would you want to play an orc? You want to play a human or an elf or someone cool. So I'm glad they've been reinvented.
It's a hot topic of role-playing games and game design now, and is something that publishers are trying to steer away from. Is this idea of there being intrinsically evil species, or intrinsically evil sentient creatures? The idea that orcs are all bad, because that is problematic.
Yes,
and I think that. D&D have said they're not doing anything about it in this edition. They'll do something about it next edition. Pathfinder have done a little bit more about it. There aren't many sort of out and out evil, unless you get to like demons, but they're monsters.
Yeah, and liches and things like that. I mean, they're just evil.
Yeah, generally, if it has a society, then you won't find sort of a single ancestry which is one alignment type. You'll find countries which have their own. Cheliax is sketchy as hell, and Nidal and places like that are really messed up. But it's not like all humans are that. And interestingly, I wouldn't be surprised if when the world gets expanded a bit more in second edition, the Drow are quietly dropped from lore completely, because they're not in the core book. They're called cavern elves, if you want to be an underground elf, and there's no real lore about them being evil and living in mushroom cities and stuff, which I am actually fine with, partly because the idea of a race of black elves who live underground and are evil is just really outdated and doesn't, I don't think, is tremendously helpful. But also it's really derivative of other franchises. It's not particularly original, and it's not the most interesting part of the Darklands, of like the underground places in second edition or in Pathfinder. When we did our Lockdown Legends adventures for Shania, I went back and reread I can't remember what it's called, but the Darklands book for Pathfinder, which has all the story of it. I think it's called Into the Darklands, and it's about all of the different things. And the Darklands in Pathfinder have 3 layers, and there's sort of the layer near the surface, which is the one that most people have been to at some point. It's like if a dungeon gets particularly deep, you're probably getting into this bit of the Darklands, and it's where stuff like Zolgaths live with their dinosaurs, and some interesting stuff like that.
Yeah.
And in the middle, you have another layer, which is everyone read R.A. Salvatore when they were teenagers. That's what this is. It's D&D Drow. That's what lives here. It's all of the D&D stuff lives on this level.
Yeah.
And it's, it's fine if that's what you want. And it's for a game system that grew out of 3rd edition D&D, it makes sense to have them there.
Do you know what? Just before we get to the 3rd level, because we've got some questions and, some supporting points, actually, that are really, really interesting. As Stu said, the Warcraft changed everything, which, they did popularise sort of orcs to a large extent, that's true. Rogvergurg says it's problematic in Tolkien as well if you look into it, depending on what theory of orc creation you use, as I don't think he canonically decided. But Alakar has come in straight away with some really, really relevant points. Just because this backs up what you're saying. D&D apparently are making changes to evil races. Both orcs and drow have been given different options in recent setting books. And literally, as you mentioned the name, he's just finished R.A. Salvatore's newest Drizzt book. And he's not going to spoil anything. Good. We don't like spoilers here. But he does some very interesting things to Lothian drow in it, which could have major consequences to Forgotten Realms lore. I just want to say that because they're going to just put off the things. I haven't got it on the permanent thing, but yes, you were saying about the 3rd level. But yeah, exactly what you were just saying.
Have you ever read any of the Drizzt books?
I haven't. No, they have been recommended, and I really, really need to.
They're worth a look because they are the most cliche. They are the most edgelordy teenage D&D book if you ever want to read. It is about the one good drow who shockingly is a better warrior than everyone else.
Oh my goodness, really?
And he decides to leave behind his life and go to the surface and become and sort of live out his life. Weirdly, I think originally it's a prequel. He's from the Icewind Dale trilogy. And
really?
He's
Icewind Dale, gosh, that's going back a bit.
They're great. I love the Icewind Dale trilogy. I like it as well because his mates in it are it's Drizzt, and then it's a halfling called Regis, and it's a human woman called Catty Bree, I think. And it's like Regis and Catty Bree. Is this a Regis and Cathy Lee pun? Like in the middle of a fantasy novel? It's the weirdest pun.
Stu's halfway through the first Drizzt compendium.
Yeah, they're but they're really fun. They are great, and they're very classic. So you can see why it's a sort of thing that people are like, okay, we should fit this in. But you have that. Coincidentally, I would love to see some stats on like the alignments of player drow that people play in Pathfinder, because I bet they're all chaotic good.
But probably, yeah, because
I bet no one actually plays an evil drow. Everyone plays the one good drow.
Good drow. Well, apparently, Wulfgar was supposed to be the protagonist, apparently, but Drizzt was so popular he became the focus.
Oh yeah. Wulfgar is like Wulfgar is just like a Conan knockoff. He's like Conan, less edgy Conan. He's so generic.
Wow.
No wonder they liked. Yeah, everyone liked the angsty,
chaotic neutral, almost like every player. Rob Virgo says is very true.
But so the final bit of the Darklands, which I love, are called the Vaults of Orv, which we got into. That's where the Sightless Sea is, and we touched on some of the great stuff on it, like the water spout in the Sightless Sea. That is connected to the Arcadian Ocean above. So this sea is like in a cavern below the sea, and there's this water spout which connects the two of them, and just by magic,
under the sea.
Yeah. Under the sea.
Under the sea. So I was going to break into a drum-esque Disney song there, but I'm not going to. So do continue.
But there's so many they don't know who it's created by. There's all these weird things in it. There's a bit in the God's Mythossery which you never got to because you guys never did any of the northern part of the God's Mythossery. You just bugged out before you got up there. But there's a bit in it. There's a magic mirror that can transport you to one of the vaults, and the vaults is that vault is filled. It's like an endless forest where there's this little society of tiny little people who sustain by, I think they eat memories. I think like if they
Wait,
catch you, they
what?
might steal like some of your character's memories, but they're essentially friendly. But they are
What?
perpetually terrorized by the headless horseman, who also lives there and who just rides around the forest murdering them. And that's the entire vault. It's just these little guys trying to steal memories and not get killed by the headless horseman.
Oh my god.
Right? It's just straight out. They're all just straight out of like pulp comics, and I love them, and they're just bonkers.
Nice.
And they're to do with the aboleths and ancient evil and all this sort of stuff. So you've got these sort of two layers that are quite original and full of quite unique stuff, and then in the middle you have this quite derivative sort of D&D layer. And I honestly wouldn't be unhappy if at some point in the lore that middle layer just gets dropped and they're just like, you know what, there are some elves, they live underground, they're like the elves who live in the forest, they've got their own societies, they don't look any different, they can see in the dark.
How would you say this then? Because like, do you think that Pathfinder, when they first broke away from Wizards of the Coast, well, not they, but yeah, when they were first formed, that was a bit of fan service to attract players or keep players who were coming with them? Do you think that was why it was put in? Because it certainly seems they're trying to cast off some of the, but partly because obviously Wizards of the Coast still own a lot of the rights to certain stuff, and other people. Tolkien owns orcs and elves technically and stuff like that, doesn't he? But trying to cast that off. Would you say that was fair? And hey, Ross.
To an extent, hey Ross.
Ross unsurprisingly said, "Get rid of alignments altogether. We don't need them." There's a lot of truth to that. They're kind of rubbish, to be honest. Anyway,
with all of the characters that I've made, and actually as we've gone through Lockdown Legends, you guys have made a lot more of your own characters. But with all the times that I've made characters for you guys to play on that, I've never put alignments on any of them, and I've never actually asked anybody for their alignment as we've gone through it, because I unless you're playing a very particular character, sometimes I find them useful for coming up with ideas for the character, but I really think they should be mostly they're a personal thing for the player if you want to, and they can be flexible. They can be linked if you're playing a champion, obviously, or a cleric, then it has more actual physical real world effects.
It does. I mean, it almost feels a little like, because obviously my bugbear is paladins, certainly 3.5. You're lawful good and you got heavily punished if you did something bad, and I'm guessing that's just to stop you from being like, I'm going to be a paladin and now I'm going to be a total dick and just slay everything and ride around my celestial horse, haha. So it's kind of like an inbuilt anti-cheat software into the game, whereas actually it should more be of a character development thing. And I don't think there's many players.
You can be an evil paladin or an evil champion now, and that makes people kneel and ride a demon horse. I don't know what the mechanics are for it, but I think with a decent GM, you could have a fun thing where if your alignment starts to slip when you're a champion, it's hard because there's no neutral champions yet. But I like the idea that you could slip from being from maybe being a paladin, and you could slip to becoming a redeemer or something like that. So your abilities fundamentally change, they shift with your morality, and you become more aggressive. But you're still effective. You're still a champion. Like, you don't just lose all of your abilities. I think that's quite fun.
Yeah.
But what were we talking about? We're talking about carryovers from D&D.
There's currently some talk about Baldur's Gate 3. Apparently the trailer is out. So excitement. Rogvagog did say that apparently the serpent folk from the Darklands are supposed to replace mind flayers, which they're not allowed to use because that is a D&D property.
They are. The mind flayers are a big D&D thing, as are beholders. They're sort of. That's another reason why there's not a lot of underground adventures in Pathfinder. Is a lot of the stuff down there are copyrighted, so you can't use it.
You find a mind. Oh no, wait, you don't know. You find a lawyer with a piece of paper who thrusts it at you and says, "If you carry on this dungeon, then I'm going to sue you."
Really, like intellect devourers, like you can get the sort of the angry brain, little brain dog. That's down there, but it doesn't have any kind of big brain-eating illithid society to be attached to. So they're just random angry brain dogs.
A brain dog.
Yeah, they're like little brains on legs, and they jump on you and eat your intelligence.
Isn't that
I think,
Half-Life?
yeah, they're very Half-Life actually. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do seem a bit like that. I think with carryovers from previous systems, generally speaking, the fantasy game systems and anything that's based on a D20 chassis moves very slowly as a community, and the expectation moves very slowly. So people, when they get a new game system, yeah, they want something new, but they also want it to feel familiar, and they want it to be in essence the same sort of, because if you went totally crazy, then why wouldn't you just play something like, Savage Worlds, or just a completely different
Not
game
Savage
system,
Lands.
or use the Cthulhu D100 system.
Right.
Once you start doing that, then it becomes very different. It's why we still have, it's why in second edition we still have ability scores, even though ability scores, I would argue, are fairly redundant in second edition, and actually in 5e as well, because
Really?
all you really need is the bonus. You don't really need to know that a strength of 18 gives you a +4 bonus. You just need to know that you have a +4 bonus. So why is your strength not 4 rather than 18?
What
But
about stat damage?
yeah,
So
it
if something
can
does,
do.
because otherwise that would remove that mechanic largely.
It
I
is,
think.
but stat damage isn't a big thing in second edition either. It tends to just be a penalty to strength based checks. So it would tend to be just like you're now at a -1 to your strength checks.
Oh,
Um,
actually,
so
Rockford goes corrected me. Stat damage isn't a thing in 2e.
yeah,
Okay, conditions
so
instead. That's true. I stand corrected.
yeah, so it's just one of those, and I think it's that kind of thing. And you could be crazy and be like, well, why do we need 6 ability scores? And there are lots of game systems that are doing that. But that's kind of just one of those things that people expect. That you expect there to be ability scores, skills, feats. That's how Pathfinder has been, and so they expect. And feats are more of a path have become more of a Pathfinder thing, perhaps, than D&D doesn't use them quite as much. But it's similar with lore. People, if they get a fantasy game system, there's a reason that the Forgotten Realms sells more copies than, say, Eberron. There's a reason that Pathfinder have Lost Omens, and that's it, and that they've never done. Well, they do Starfinder, but that's a really separate kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They've never done just a different fantasy world where everything's slightly askew. They just find a way to kind of fit that into a little corner of the world, so that most of your core players, if you want to play knights and wizards in a more sort of Tolkien setting, you can do that. A lot of the new stuff has been challenging that, because a lot of the new adventures are going to be set in much more what would be very weird places for traditional gaming. We're off to the Mwangi Expanse. We're going to be off to Tian Sha soon to do the Ruby Phoenix tournament. So we're going to be going to lots of new and interesting places.
It's
But I
funny.
think a lot of those creatures get carried over because people expect them to be there, and then you gradually start phasing them out as you realize you don't need them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because you make a good point that most people adventure, in the usual kind of biomes, but things like deserts and scrublands and savanna and jungles and things have been a staple of fantasy writing and world building for decades. I mean, you mentioned Conan earlier, Robert E. Howard, amazing writer, and Conan was pretty much in that part of the world. He never really went to a savannah at all. It was always deserts and jungles and stuff.
The difficult thing that I am finding with developing stuff that will come up after episode 100 is kind of how to get you guys around Garand, once you start adventuring around there, because it hasn't been developed as much in storyline, and because it is by nature a bit more spread out. There's not as much stuff there, so it's not as easy to sort of just say you get on Captain Gumbo's boat, he takes you to Absalom. And like we did a voyage from Nirmathas to Absalom in one episode with just a few jump cuts, which you can do. And you could do that with Garand, but like the distances are huge. So it makes you think about like, okay, so what is actually in this empty space of map? This can't just be grassland or desert. There has to be stuff here. And it makes you quite creative. That's why I'm excited, because it's made me creative about like thinking about what we can put in there and what we can do on the journey
Yeah.
before we get, it's us. We say we're playing the Slithering next. We're not going to be rocking up in Kibwe in episode 101. Like, it's going to take us a while to get there.
Because we've always done the journey as part of the adventure, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I like that, because I think a fantasy world should relish the vastness. It should relish the fact that it takes a long time to get places, and the world is big. It's one of the nice things. It's one of the nice things with Starfinder from a gaming point of view, that you can just get in your ship and in a couple of days you're at the place where the quest is happening, and it keeps things moving nice and quickly. And that's a difference, but that's space storytelling. That's a different kind of thing. In fantasy, I think, because I love the Fellowship of the Ring. I love that, you want the journey. And you want that sense of exploration, and that sense that the world is huge and that there's horizons to explore. That's what I love with it.
And also it harks back to a time historically where, if you wanted to travel 200 miles that way, that was probably a dangerous journey, because anything could happen. It's going to take a long time, and who knows what's going to happen in a month. Just a point from Alucard, he said that was the idea behind Forgotten Realms. I think people like to have a more focused setting sometimes.
And I think it's a natural progression as you gain more, you become less interested in the kind of the training wheels fantasy setting, and you start wanting to do some more stuff. There's a reason that we had so much fun in Caermarga, I think, because it's so different to what we were doing. But at the same time, if we had tried to sell our podcast, I think, as a podcast set in Caermarga, and try to explain what that is, it's this city that's completely enclosed and it's sort of underground, but it's not. And there's all these different vying power bases, and I don't think we'd have become as popular having that as the hook, as if we just sort of said it's elves and wizards, but it's a bit funny and zany, and then from that steer into the kind of the stories we want to tell. So in a sense, we're doing the same thing as as Forgotten Realms and Lost Omens. Where we're given the gateway drug of simple fantasy.
I do think there's legs in a Caermarga Lights, sort of detective-based agency in Caermarga, because it's one of those places where you literally, if you started following some of those cases, and you'd have anything cross your desk, like you just wouldn't know what was going to be the next story. One of those incredibly emotive places, and often came out last week, but it's often marked as one of the Dangerlings' favourite sections of the adventure.
A lot of people love Caermarga, and we've got a lot of good stuff in
it's
there.
Interesting.
I actually I had a brief chat with James L. Sutter on Twitter this week, who wrote City of Strangers, that we based all of Caermarga off, or our version of Caermarga. And I've said this a million times. I think City of Strangers is one of the best lore books I've ever read for a role-playing game, because it has so many plot hooks. It has so many half-explained things, because that's the trick to writing a lore book, is you want to tell a bit of backstory, but you want to leave about 4 or 5 questions in every bit thing you write, because then adventurers can go and find those out. And you've got it never wraps up anything. It just leaves all of these things that you could explore, and that's where we got like troll augurs from. It's where we got the main description. It's where we got Biss from. It's where we got the stacks. It's where we got Uncle Gooden. Uncle Gooden is in that book, but he's only a really short paragraph, and all it says is he's a philanthropist, but there's just a tone in it that makes it sound like this can't all be above board. And from that, it grew into our version of Uncle Gooden, the horrible bloke mage.
The bloke mage.
I got a chance to show James the artwork of Uncle Gooden that Simon did, and he was over the moon with it. So it was nice to be able to sort of share some artwork that we created.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting times. And we haven't really talked about what we were actually going to talk about, which was
to keep me on track. That's the whole point of it.
But to be honest, because we're going to talk about the Lockdown Legends and sort of the adventures there. But I think actually this has been an organic. I'm happy to let it run if it's an interesting organic conversation, and I do think this is sort of quite topical, and it is talking about the future as well, things that we're going to be doing, and keep it online for anyone out there who might be watching who is a dungeon master themselves, or a games master, or running a game, to give you ideas of places to go and so things to do, and not to be afraid to jump in. And I think you're absolutely right about the journey as well. It fascinates me, and of course you can get sidetracked like this
Yeah.
conversation, and lots of interesting things can happen. Who knows
I
what's going to happen?
Yeah, we were gonna like. See, I brought all my PFS adventures. Is Nostrix in the chat because he'll know more about this than I will.
Nostrix hasn't said anything yet,
He wants the
but look
video.
at that. Look at that's a lot of
There we
a lot
go.
of
So
paper.
I got all the ones pretty. There's sandstones in there as well. We did Legacy of not Legacy of Fire. I think that's a Starfinder adventure path. Unforgiving Fire, which I was really excited about because Rovergrog played it with his group right before the episodes aired, and so I had to stay really quiet about the fact we were about to do it as well. But so yeah, the ones we ran, I don't know if we could do a full review because I don't really know enough about Society, but they're all level 1 adventures. For most of them, we ran them at tier 1, tier 1, 2, so aimed at level. Pathfinder Society adventures have 2 different difficulty modes that you can play them at. Right. So you can, if your party are majority level 1 and level 2, there's an easier one. If they're level 3 and level 4, there's a hard mode that you can play that usually has some better stats or an extra monster or something.
Okay.
And they do that for sort of all of them. Most of them we played them at that. The only one we didn't do that for was the Velda ones where we did Unforgiving Fire, because I got carried away on the live stream when we made Basco Mops and he ended up at level 4. And then I was just like, everyone go crazy. And so it ended up with Velda was like the only level 1 character.
Which was fine. I don't mind that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is always this fear that you're going to get sort of smashed in your own backstory, because that would have to be a pause in the record or some very clever plot points from you, and you woke up and it was all a dream, which is nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
We sort of changed. We changed a few bits. I got contacted by Leo Glass, who wrote Unforgiving Fire. He's one of Paizo's editors. He saw that we played it, and he listened to the episodes.
Wow!
And he listened. Apparently, he listened with his wife to the last episode because he's a huge fan of the Phoenix trap, the Phoenix rune trap that Velda walked into, which we didn't get a chance to really play with. But it's like a rune on the floor, and you step on it, and it explodes and does fire damage.
Okay.
Rules as written, and it's quite hard to do this without a map. But what the Phoenix thing does after it's exploded is it flies to a random square and sets itself there again, and then disappears. So you have this trap that's constantly going, this landmine that keeps going off and then hiding somewhere else on the map. So every time you move, you might explode.
No, so it's like an invincible, semi-aware mine.
And I think you can disarm it or you can dispel it. But if you just have to try, if otherwise you just do the fight and there's this thing just moving around, exploding all over the place. And apparently he was listening to it with his wife, and his wife was like, "Have they set the trap off yet?" And at that point, Velda walked into the trap.
Yay! Was he pleased?
We didn't change too much on that. Actually, we used all of the little side missions. I really liked all the little games, all the training things. I
like the games. It was some lovely. It was great to get some random dice rolls in there, which is always fun. Where it's just sort of like you're just pitting your luck against someone else. It was kind of like Takeshi's Castle, but Pathfinder style.
Yes, and obviously if you play it as written, it's much more kind of monk themed, and it's a kung fu school rather than a gladiator school. But otherwise, it was pretty similar.
Yeah.
Archaeology and Aspenthar.
Aspenthar. That sounds like somewhere you'd want to go skiing.
It does, doesn't it? It sounds delightful.
Yes.
We didn't use a huge amount of this. This is
which one was this for?
So this came in. We used 2 in Shania's game, so we didn't use any in the Beelzebub one. That was all homebrew and some stuff about Absalom.
Yeah.
And a monster that the Dangerlings created, a horrible monster. And then we used one for something called Something's Cooking. We used in the Jess episodes, which is my favorite adventure. That's the one with the evil restaurant. That was an old third edition one. Back when you could get free adventures on the Wizards of the Coast site. These 2, then we used 2 of them in Shania's ones. So we episodes like 2 and 3 of the Shania one use Archaeology and Aspenthar, which is it's a standard kind of dungeon delving one. It's an archaeology kind of quest. So you're going down into you have to climb down. That's where you have the thing of climbing down the cliff and putting the pitons on. Obviously, we turned it into a pit. But it's the same sort of thing. And then and then there's loads of stuff about the Jiskan Imperium, which I know nothing about, but they're like an ancient Gurundi civilization, and they built loads of golems, and so that's why there's a golem in it, and we changed it to dwarves because that made it a bit closer to it.
That's actually a bit more current to sort of modern lore. Like dwarves have become much more engineering, really. I think as time's gone on, so they build things. Just a quick point. Apparently for Rogvagog, his group skipped them all. Sad face.
You can just kick the door in and fight them.
Yeah, didn't do it at all. And are those adventures still on Wizards? Alec, I think they might be on the DM's Guild, but not sure if they're free.
Yeah, I reckon they probably are.
Yeah, given the way the world's gone, I think they're probably not. But maybe check them out.
I dusted off a very old printout that I had from back when they were free, and you could just download them and print them off. Like so much of our old campaigns were just those adventures that I just changed stuff up on and reworked to be other things.
Oh yeah, apparently there's a lot of old 2e and 3.5 stuff on there.
Nice.
Which actually,
good stuff.
I mean, that's the thing, and I think just listening to you talk, it's really good inspiration for anyone out there who is, sort of worried about making scenes or campaigns. You can chop and change and make a real Frankenstein's monster of things. Like if you like that little bit in this one, and you like that bit in this one, just come up with some faff to link the two. It's like writing a musical, basically. So you've got the scenes that you like as your musical numbers. They're just a bit of link between them, and there you go. You've got a path.
Yeah, just rename stuff. And Graham's Courgette, we did this was the last one.
What, Graham's Courgette?
Graham's Courgette.
Graham's Courgette. Yes.
That is a.
I think Graham's Courgette would have been a more interesting story.
Graham's Courgette.
I'd like to find out what the deal is with Graham's Courgette.
And that's that's set in the land of the Lenormand Kings normally, rather than the Sightless Sea. You got to go find a ship, and you've got to recover. So it was an amulet in our version. It's unsurprisingly a gorget on the person who is impaled on and he's a legendary hero. You have to go and get his stuff from his battle with the sea serpents, and then unsurprisingly in the rules as written version you have to fight the sea serpents. You can't distract them with a placenta.
I do, yes. I do remember you saying that you had to fight it, and also you changed it a bit. I think you did a great job on that. I think it was fantastic. And for any dangerlings who don't know what a gorget is, it is a piece of armor that hangs around your neck to protect your neck, your gorge.
It seems, is that something you would wear on its own?
You could do. You would more likely, because it might deter a sort of head cut or a throat cut. So you might wear it with sort of leather armor or something a little bit less sort of impressive, and then wear a gorget because it's very small and quite cheap. So yes,
it makes sense that this guy would have it.
Yeah, and Alucard part of armor. Yes, exactly. And also in more impressive sets of plate armor, it was included. Alucard says he was running an Eberron campaign, and the DM's Guild became a fast friend of his.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Just finding all that filler. That's what I love. That's why we don't play an adventure path, because this is what we've always done, is link little adventures together.
We've managed to spark off quite a chat about gorgets now. It's part of armor, emphasising Game of Thrones, and only really good against vampires. It's true. I'm sure there are lots of fighting people who'd argue with that, but
just one of the things. I mean, they're all really nice adventures. I would say, I think Sandstone Secret, if we go back to the beginning, I think Sandstone Secret is terrific. It's got a reputation for being particularly deadly, and depending on your party makeup, like if you end up fighting the swarms, oh boy, that's a rough adventure at low level.
Swarms are horrific
because it's Sandstone has got like 4 different end bosses that you can change around. You can switch around depending on how you want to do it. So I made you guys fight a mummy because, of course, I wanted it to be an iconic. And of course, you can have a mummy fight, but you can fight a big statue. You can fight swarms of scarabs, and the scarab fight is brutal. These are all quests. So if you're looking for little Pathfinder Society ones, I think Unforgiving Fire I really like. I think Unforgiving Fire is really fun with the mini games. Archaeology, it had a couple of nice encounters. It's hard to judge it because it's really just a climb down a cliff and then fighting a golem. And actually, despite what it may seem on the podcast, I'm not a massive fan of golem fights. They have too many immunities. Their AC is a bit low, and they just have loads of hit points. They just kind of stand around getting. They just soak up hits.
Yeah.
And I don't like creatures with loads of immunities. I like creatures that have a few obvious weaknesses.
Well,
and they do.
I mean,
golems all have some interesting weaknesses because they all have like a couple of spells that affect them really badly. But you need a really smart wizard, and that's not.
What are you trying to say?
That's not quite
outrageous.
But you need a wizard who is in character smart and has a player who has read all of the bestiaries, who is GM'd really, and can just be like, I know what we'll deal with this.
Yeah.
And happens to have the right spell prepared, and then you can hit them and win straight away.
I mean, I know it comes up a lot, and we're not going to wax lyrical on it. But obviously the Rust Golem, and it was like, what's it weak to? Adamantium. Ah, yes, the rarest metal on the entire planet. That's what it's. Oh, didn't have any adamantium on you? Oh, tough luck. Looks like you're going to be fighting it for days.
Yeah.
It is just like that. Now, just before we carry on, it is 5 to 7, and Dan did say he wanted to wrap it up a little bit earlier today.
So we should probably start wrapping up.
But So in the brief, would you recommend those adventures?
I would recommend. Yeah, I would recommend most of them. I think Archaeology is maybe the weaker of them. It's still good. Like if you want a quick romp, you're still going to have fun on that. And actually, the climbing, I would say it's worth getting it for the climbing task because that's actually a really nice little skill check that's written really well. I think Sandstone, Unforgiving Fire are really good. And I think Greyhound's Gorget is really lovely, really atmospheric. And actually, one of the things that we've missed out on by the fact we've converted all of these society things to fit in our campaign is we've not in any case really used any of the really rich NPCs that are in all of these. And there are some amazing NPCs in all of these and really, really good characters. And I'm going to use this as a chance to once again share the picture of
look at
Brejik Torrenson, the incredibly handsome venture captain, half orc from Greyhound's Gorget, and his guide dog because he's deaf.
So good, so good, so much imagination. Hi, Steph. You're here from work just in time to catch the end. However, we will be. Fear not, Dangerlings. Fear not. If you have missed this podcast, the live stream, we will be putting up the video, and it will be saved on Twitch as well. Apologies for the beginning bit. We'll edit that together to make sure it's one whole thing, so you can actually hear our introduction, which is like a hidden surprise that no one saw because it was on my channel by accident. However, thank you so much for joining us. It's been tremendous, absolutely tremendous. Any last words from you, Dan?
It's been lovely. Thank you all for all the kind words about episode 100 so far. I hope you've all been enjoying it. Please enjoy the next one. The introduction to the next one is I would say no less heartfelt, but it is ridiculous because Colin and I messed up on the editing and we kept some of it in. So that'll be a fun part. But it's a very silly one. You're going to get a lot more if you enjoy Sick Wolf's antics. You're going to get a whole lot more Sick Wolf.
Oh, everyone loves a bit of Sick Wolf. Yes. So yeah, thank you very much. That's been a tremendous. Thank you so much for joining us as well on this Wednesday. We'll be here every Wednesday, giving you a live stream. And also, if there's anything in particular you want to discuss, do buzz it over to us, and we can have it as a topic, or certainly raise it during the sort of. It's not DMQs anymore. We don't do DMQs. They're gone. Dan did not like DMQs, but this is the Wednesday DCP live stream where we ask questions to the DM.
Keep posting ideas of what to call it in the Discord as well, because I'm calling it Danger Chat at the moment, and I don't know, or Dangerous Talk, or I don't know. I want us to have a cool name. I want us to have a Thrones Cast.
Danger Wednesdays. Danger Wednesdays.
Danger Wednesdays. But what if they don't end up on Wednesdays? What if they move? Oh God!
Well, then we could just change the name, Dan. Man, then it can be an ironic title. It's Danger Wednesdays on a Thursday. How dangerous is that?
Dangerous Wednesdays.
Dangerous Wednesdays.
Quite like that.
Yeah.
That's quite nice.
Oh, so there we go. So Dangerous Wednesdays. Anyway, we're again doing our usual trick of waxing lyrical. So this has been myself, Foxy Lockhart, and Dan.
And me, the Dungeon Master.
Yes, indeed, the Dungeon Master. And we're wishing you having a lovely, lovely Wednesday wherever you are. And we'll see you soon. All right,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody.
Bye.